I'm Laura Bonnell, and this is the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast coming to you from Detroit. Please subscribe and even rate and comment on our podcasts when it moves you. I learn something new with every podcast, and I'm always inspired by the people that are showcased here. We don't give medical advice. You need to connect with your doctor for that. I hope that this Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast educates you and sparks some volunteering or advocacy. The CF community needs people like you. Thanks to our sponsors, Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex for their support. Carre Callaway is the founder of Kwong, and I have a personal connection with her. She has the indie rock band that she founded in Los Angeles, California, and she is a multi-instrumentalist. She is the soul singer and the songwriter, and she was discovered at the age of 17 by Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails. Carre opened for the band in 2005 and released her debut album, Get a Witness, about 8 years ago in 2015. She tours in the UK and Europe, and since then she's accomplished so much more that we're going to talk about. Love Me to Death, another LP, Oh Well, and Couples Only. We will also talk about her personal life. She married guitarist Wes Borland of Limp Bizkit. The couple lived in Detroit, and that is at about the time that I met her or shortly after that. Carre, who I met before she went public with her CF diagnosis, filed for divorce in 2019, and her CF journey was painful, and you'll hear why. Just an incredible time talking with this amazing woman who I have grown to love, and I'm always looking to see where she is in the world and what she's doing, and you're going to fall in love with her as well. Carre, it's fabulous to be doing this Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast with you. I can't wait till everyone gets to hear your story. Are you in the midst of a tour, or you just ended your tour? You're in LA right now?
Yeah, so I just got back from tour last week. I was tour with two bands, actually two other bands called the Dandy Warhols and the Black Angels. So it was a pretty big tour up the West Coast, up to Vancouver, and then randomly ending in Texas. So it was a little bit chaotic, but it was great.
How were the crowds? How was the feedback? How did you feel on this tour?
It was actually amazing. It was really challenging, to be honest, because I did something completely different than what I've been doing. I did this tour solo. So usually I have a band backing me, a touring lineup. So I tour a lot. I guess pre-pandemic, I was touring a lot, but post-pandemic, not as much. But I've always toured with the band, except for when I was a teenager. I opened for Nine Inch Nails by myself as a solo artist without a band. And I had things thrown at my head and people screaming at me the entire time. And it was kind of a traumatic experience, to say the least. So after that, I was like, I'm never doing that again. I can't do this by myself. I have to have a band, a backing band. I don't want to be on stage by myself. So when I was offered this tour, they actually, because there were two other bands with big setups, they actually asked me to play solo. So I started having a lot of anxiety because of the last time I played solo when I opened for Nails. So at first, it was very stressful to have to figure out how to do it all myself. You know, there's drum tracks, a drum machine, a synthesizer, and I'm playing guitar as well and singing. There's a ton of guitar pedals and effects and just a lot of stuff to have to do as one person by yourself all at the same time. But it ended up going really well, and people were super receptive. And I think now that I've figured it out, I kind of just want to keep going with the solo thing. I think it's really empowering and also pretty cool to be totally self-reliant.
I saw how Wikipedia describes your music and all of that. I can only
imagine.
No, they said it's like indie music, you know, but when I listened to it, and when you did a song for us when we first hit the pandemic and we did that virtual fundraiser, that song gave me chills. It was beautiful. It's like romantically beautiful. I don't know how else to describe it. And then you do things completely the opposite also that are, I mean, they're
It's louder. It's a whole different thing. But you are in it completely. So I enjoy both spectrums of your music. I just think it's beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I do approach it more of just, I see it as an art rather than song structure and, if it's radio friendly or, I see music as an art. So I don't like to limit myself. I try to span a lot of genres, but live, it's definitely very loud, very noisy and wild and chaotic. But I think genres are kind of on the out anyway, which I appreciate. I think it's really freeing to not have to fit yourself into a box that is a genre. So that works in my favor.
I agree. And as a listener, I really appreciate it more when people ask like what you like. It is also, I feel the same way. Well, I like everything that appeals to me. I'm not stuck in one, category of music either. It's whatever gets you feeling, right? It's whatever.
Yeah, in the moment, yeah.
Right. So I'm glad to hear that too, because there's so much. And art, oh my gosh, music is absolutely art. It's just, I wish I could sing, but not a chance for me. It's not happening. So take us, I guess we'll start a little bit back with when you started in music before you were discovered by Nine Inch Nails, right? Before that, and then kind of where you are now?
I grew up around music because my dad had a pretty well-known nightclub in Denver, out of all places. And it was an industrial punk goth rock nightclub called Rock Island. And it wasn't just a nightclub. I think it was a scene. And I think being around music from the get, I've just felt like it was a language that I understood and that I could communicate with better than maybe I do verbally. I'm able to, I think, more effectively communicate through sound and through lyrics. So I felt that way from a very young age. I think I really struggled to communicate and what I was feeling and my needs and my wants and when I was a kid. So music came more naturally than just verbal communication. And I found some sort of peace in it because it was very cathartic. And I think as a kid, I had a pretty traumatic, chaotic upbringing, and I didn't know how to cope. And I think music served as a coping mechanism in a lot of ways. So I gravitated towards it at a really young age. I taught myself several instruments and used it mostly as a way to communicate words, though, like my lyrics. The lyrics were always the most important, and then came the music. And I was doing that all through middle school and high school. I was in a punk band in high school. And then when I was 17, I met Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, and it just kind of turned my life around because I was headed towards going to college on the East Coast in New York City. And instead, I moved to Los Angeles and started working at music here. And it was strange because I think Hollywood and LA, it's a very specific culture that you don't really find anywhere else. And not in a good way, it's a lot of it's really toxic. So as a teenager, it was really difficult coming to LA and trying to pursue something, an artistic endeavor within the entertainment industry, because those are two different things. So that's how I got started. And it took me a while. I opened for Nine Inch Nails a few times when I was a teenager, which I described earlier, and it was unpleasant, to say the least. And the business side of it, the industry side of it's really unpleasant. And I did not take naturally to that at all. I think when you are younger, you like to think you work hard at something and you're rewarded. If you just devote yourself fully to something and work really hard, and if you're good at it, you're rewarded for it. And that's just not how the entertainment industry is. Success isn't dependent on being talented or working hard at all. So it's very backwards and strange, and it was hard for me to acclimate to a lifestyle in Los Angeles and Hollywood. But I've been here for a really long time now, and I've never quite liked it. I've lived a few other places as well, where I've met you in Detroit, and now I'm moving to London. So, but I think LA is where I technically got my start in this industry, not as a musician, but in the music industry.
That is so interesting, and interesting you said that, because I think a little bit broadcasting, being a journalist, is a little bit like that. Work really hard, but it's not a clear path, So I can relate slightly to that. So take us, kind of where you go after you've played with Nine Inch Nails, and then what happens after that?
I started Queen Kwong as, it's just me, but I had a backing band. And so I started playing a lot and got a lot of radio play in the UK. So I just naturally, for some reason, things picked up there. I mean, I know why. It's because I play non-commercial type music, and I think the UK audience is more receptive to that. So I started getting play in the UK, and I went over there and started playing a lot in the UK and Europe, and that's where I'm mostly tour, because that's where my the majority of my fan base is. And I was doing that for many years, and I put out a couple of records. I just put out my third record last year, but I've put out EPs too. So I've done 3 full-length records and a couple EPs, and I do things in a pretty unique way when it comes to rock records. It's not usually how people do things, but my creative process is a little bit different, where I don't pre-write any songs. I just record in the moment. So all the records are pretty much improvised in the moment. And then I just release it as is. And then when I'm touring, the songs kind of actually come together more. So the recorded versions of my songs aren't the most perfect, but they're maybe the most honest and raw versions. And my first couple full-length records are not easy to listen to by any means. Like, even though they did get radio play overseas, I know, it's more of, I'm an artist. Like, there's a lot of critical acclaim, but when it comes to actually listening to some of this, it's very difficult because it was stream of consciousness type recordings, very lo-fi. The last record I put out last year, the most recent one, I think I got a better handle on how to do that kind of creative process and still make it listener friendly, or at least as listener friendly as I can be. So anyhow, I was doing this for a long time. And I met my now ex-husband, I guess, I don't even know when that was. Seems like an entirely different lifetime, but I met him years into my career, and he actually is also a musician, and he played in my live band for a while. We did a couple tours together where he was playing guitar, and we moved to Detroit because we had a home renovation reality TV show, strangely enough. And it was about us moving into this house in Detroit, our move there, and renovating it and turning it into a home studio for ourselves, and also for a record label we wanted to start there. And that's how I ended up in Detroit with my ex-husband, my now ex-husband. And this was all before I knew I had cystic fibrosis. And I think the cystic fibrosis diagnosis actually was a huge turning point in my life, because, I was diagnosed, I'm trying to think, when I was 30, I believe. So pretty late on.
Right.
And I'm half Chinese, and I think even though I was really sick when I was a kid, and I've always had respiratory issues, and I've always been kind of sick on and off my whole life. But when I was growing up as a kid, it was still believed that Asians couldn't really have cystic fibrosis.
Right.
So my mother being Chinese, it was just ruled out. Like, I was never even tested. I had never had sweat tests or any kind of test to test for cystic fibrosis, because it was just ruled out because my mom was Chinese. So the turning point, so I get to Detroit. I've already had a pretty good career as an indie rock musician. I've toured the world. I got married at the DIA in Detroit, the Detroit Institute of Arts. It was kind of like a very perfect, seemingly perfect setup, and I wanted to explore Detroit and lay roots down there. But when I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, my life was kind of turned upside down, and everything changed. I think within months, my marriage was over. And I'm pretty sure that's when I met you.
That is when we met.
Okay. So you met me at the lowest point of my life. I'm very sorry.
No, I mean, it was for me just, I don't know. It's weird to say it was a touching time, but it was like, I just wanted to be there for you like I would for anybody who has CF and is thrown in this situation. And yeah, it was actually wonderful to meet you, and you're still in my life. Like, and now it's weird to say you have a great story to tell, but you do have this great story to tell, and so many people are going to learn from you. And now there is more testing for people of color, but still in the United States, there's underdiagnosing of the Asian population and African American and Hispanic. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been weird. It's been I think because it's been a few years since I was diagnosed with CF, but because I was diagnosed with CF and then my life seemingly, as I knew it, my life fell apart really fast. I didn't start to process what the diagnosis even meant until probably more recently.
You lived like one of the worst nightmares. I mean, just that I heard from my kids, like, will somebody love me if they know I have CF? And then Wes from Limp Bizkit, that was a fear that a lot of people can relate to, and it happened to you.
Yeah, that's true. It is. I don't know. I can't speak for him, and I hope to never cross paths with him ever again. However, I will say that being the one who was diagnosed with something like cystic fibrosis and the doctors at that time really not having a good idea of what the prognosis was, because my combo of the genetic mutation combo is very, very rare. They didn't really have a good idea of what the prognosis would be for me. And at first it was really scary because I was diagnosed when I was in the hospital. I was very, very sick. CF manifests in a few really scary ways. That one is my lungs start to bleed. I have really bad lung bleeds. And within seconds, my lungs are just full of blood and I feel like I'm drowning, and I technically am drowning. And I was hospitalized and they thought I had tuberculosis. No idea what I had. And at the time, my then husband was by my side and very supportive and seemingly perfect. And that's what you hope for when you're sick and you find out that you have a disease that's going to be a lifelong disease, and you hope for someone like a husband or a partner in life to be that partner in life. And there were hard conversations, doctors saying, well, this is what it means, probably, like, this is what it means, like, lifespan wise, this is what it means, like, what you as a touring musician, as a singer, as somebody who travels a lot, this is how you could be affected, A, B, C, and D. These are the downsides. If you want to have children, there are things you have to consider. And it was a lot for me. It was really overwhelming. And it was a lot for him. And he, bailed. In a very dramatic way, in a let's burn down everything type of way. And we had a pretty public relationship because he is in, I guess they're a famous band, but infamous band. And it was hard because I was not only left by him, but left by a lot of our mutual friends. As I said, in this industry, people tend to, where the chips fall, it's usually people go where the more famous party is, out of fear of burning a bridge, or I don't know. I don't know what it is really. Lack of integrity runs rampant in the music industry and the entertainment industry. So I was abandoned on a lot of fronts. And to be honest with you, I was just in survival mode where my life I lost everything, everything. Health insurance, my house, my car, my pets, a lot of my friends, my life partner. And I lost everything so fast that I just went into survival mode, to be honest, was just like, how do I get through today or this moment? And processing my diagnosis was not, that was put on the back burner. It was more just, how do I get through right now, this moment, and on to tomorrow. And for a long time, it didn't feel possible. For a long time, it was very, very hopeless. And then I made my most recent record, Couples Only, and it was so cathartic and necessary for me. And it deals with everything that we're talking about, but also just being an imperfect person and what that means, and accepting that and kind of owning it. And also facing, mortality, and facing loss and abandonment and betrayal, and how temporary everything is, the good and the bad. And that's where I am now, pretty much. I put out the record last year. It's been doing great. It was reviewed really well. I had this great tour. I'm recording another record. And I think only recently, like only this year, have I really started to think about what CF means to me and what living with CF means to me. And I still don't know. And I think you're the first person I'm talking to in depth about this, because I feel kind of guilty and I feel conflicted and a little bit ashamed, because it's like, who am I to talk about CF when I still don't understand it? So it is just so unique to my experience. But earlier this year, I was very, very sick. I had pneumonia, COVID, valley fever. And I'm always dealing with like CF related pneumonia in some way, But I had so many things all at the same time, and it was very scary. And I think I had to really face not only what like day-to-day chronic illness meant, but that this could really affect, this could kill me. I mean, that's as blunt as I could put it. It was like, wow, this can actually kill me. What's going on with my lungs and my immune system and everything right now. And I think this year I've been much more conscious of the gravity of that, and how that will be reflected in how often I tour or how hard I tour. That's something I have to really consider for the first time. So.
And how long has it been since you were diagnosed?
6 years.
So that's not long. Mm-mm. And I say to people who have a late diagnosis that you're really in the baby stages of this disease still. Like my girls, we diagnosed them. Molly was 3 months old. Emily was at birth. And you have all that time to process it. But when you're diagnosed so late, like you can't beat yourself up about maybe you don't know everything, because the process is so long. I mean, there's the whole grief process about having it and then going from there and then trying to understand it all. I mean, if I remember correctly, you didn't know what enzymes were and you were...
No idea.
That's what I thought. So you hadn't even heard of enzymes, and I couldn't believe like no one put you on enzymes yet.
No, you actually were like, you educated me a lot more than even the doctors were. I mean, I was actually talking to you, and I think there's been several times over the last few years where I've asked you, have you heard of this? Or this is what's going on with me. And because I really don't know a lot.
It takes so much time to learn and to advocate for yourself and say to a doctor, this doesn't sound right, or this doesn't work for me, or how do you know this? I mean, it's okay to challenge them and ask questions. You should. And then if you don't like a CF clinic, go to another one because they're not helping you in the right way. So I'm sure you've learned so much just in the short time that you've been diagnosed, but it's such a long process.
Yeah.
To learn everything.
It is, and I'm still doing it, and I mean, what you just said, just the grief that comes with it too, I think it was really convoluted, because the grief that I was feeling, it was all wrapped up with like the CF diagnosis and my marriage ending and my life as I know it ending and being uprooted. And then, it was just too overwhelming. It was hard to parse out what's what, So I think now that I'm in a better place in my life, it's actually, I have to take more time to really actually feel and understand what it means to have CF. Yeah, and it feels very strange to me still, very foreign. And I can't tell you how many times, like, if I go to a new CF clinic, Or even the same ones, but I see new personnel, like new nurse practitioners, whatever, and they come in and they're like, what do you mean you don't know what this is? And do you have one of these? And do you have one of those? Do you have a port? Do you have, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Oh, really?
A port and a vest and enzymes and this and that. And I have no idea. It's been hard because in a lot of ways, I don't have CF. I'm CF free, appearing.
Right, because it's an invisible disease.
Yeah, it's a totally invisible disease. And because it manifests in just kind of seemingly random ways for me, it's very atypical in my case. And so it's been hard to know. It's hard to know how to be careful even a lot of the time. Just even being my entire adult life, I've been kind of this punk rock, indie rock, wild musician and singer. And that's weird there's like a disconnect between that and who I am when I have, when I'm bedridden with pneumonia and coughing up pints of blood and having to be rushed to the hospital. I haven't quite figured out how to reconcile those two parts of me.
And that's such a terrifying situation. I mean,
it's terrifying.
Terrifying. It's so scary. No matter how many times it happens, I think it's so scary. It happened with one of our daughters, and it's never not scary. It's always scary.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I still don't. Sometimes my boyfriend said the other day, we've been flying back and forth, and I've traveled internationally my whole life, but my lungs were hurting, and I was like, oh gosh, like I hope that, there isn't an inflamed infection that causes a lung bleed or whatever. But then he was like, well, what if we're on a plane? What if we're on a 12-hour flight, and that starts to happen? What does that mean? And I don't know. I don't have the answers for that.
Right. Yeah, that would be really scary. As a matter of fact, it's called hemoptysis when you're coughing up blood. And when you have hemoptysis exacerbation, you are not supposed to fly for 2 weeks after it. But I'm sure you knew that. But
yeah,
things like that. But I think they've dealt with everything on planes.
Yeah,
so God forbid that happened, they would take care of you.
It's just one of those things that I'm like, gosh, it's weird that I haven't thought of that before, or that's even a thing that I have to think about.
Right.
But yeah, the hemoptysis is a strain. It's like how CF is manifested the most, like outwardly for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the number one symptom that I've shown consistently, and it's very jarring and scary. And sometimes it's just a little, and sometimes it's a lot. And then when is it an emergency, and when is it time to, go to a hospital? But as you said, it's just scary. It's just one of those things that you see in movies,
Right.
Like blood everywhere.
Scary movies.
Yeah,
right.
Scary movies are like, oh, you're about to die type situation,
Right.
So it's scary. It's weird. And I'm still figuring it out.
And I know we talked about it when we were meeting here, but do you have more family support now? I know you didn't then. And that, I can't imagine. That's so hard. Because like when your marriage ended and all those people left you and then you have no family support, that's extremely difficult.
Yeah, no, it was really hard. No, luckily I have friends who stayed by my side through all of it. I came back to LA and I was homeless for a year, and I was just staying at friends' houses on different sofas. And I have great lifelong friends who have a strong moral compass and did the right thing and were just very supportive of me. But, I also, like I said, I grew up in a really strange way, a unique upbringing, and I don't have the family support that, like I see how you're there for your daughters and how your family works as a unit. And that's amazing. And I think that makes a huge, I know it would make a huge difference to anyone going through any kind of hardship, to have that. But I've just leaned heavily on my friends. Yeah, I guess it just forces you to figure out how to be there for yourself.
Right. You see how
Which
strong
is definitely
you are.
not
right?
as comforting, or as, it's hard. Like self-soothing is definitely not as comforting, but you just kind of have to do it.
Well, and you did it. And that's what I was going to ask you. How do you feel like you are on the other side of it because you're still here, you're strong, you did what you had to do, you're still learning about this disease, but you made it. You made it through to the other side. And how do you feel about the disease now that, you've come this far?
I think everything that's happened in the last couple of years or the last several years, the biggest takeaway has been like, just because you feel something's impossible or you feel like you're hopeless and nothing's going to work out and it's just impossible to go another day, like feelings aren't facts, And just to remember that, like you said, I'm kind of out the other side of that horrific saga of my life. And there was a long time where I didn't think that was even possible. Like I truly felt it in myself that I would not make it, and I have. So obviously I was wrong about those intense gut feelings I was having where I was like, I know that this is the end. It wasn't. I'm here. And there's something reassuring about that. And when it comes to just living with CF, I think it's an ongoing, intimidating, sometimes scary, mysterious journey. And as you said, I'm kind of at the beginning of it still. But I do feel like I'm in a place where I'm actually strong enough and prepared enough and secure enough in myself to take that journey without just being terrified, just taking it head on. And it's taken a lot to get me here, though, to get me to the place of, being willing to even admit that I have cystic fibrosis, honestly.
And that's what I was thinking all this time that you're talking, and just the journey that I've seen from, afar, like, you are so strong. You did it. You made it in your career and in your CF and in your love life, Like, that's fantastic. And you should be so proud of everything that you did to get where you are.
Thank you.
I mean, that is huge.
Thank you. I think I appreciate you saying that because I think sometimes hearing it from somebody else puts it in perspective. Because, yeah, I went through hell. I went through hell. So thanks. I appreciate you recognizing that. I do feel like I'm in a place where I can be proud of where I am,
Yeah, you really should be. And how is the CF journey? You're going from the UK, which, according to my daughter, Molly, who lives there, she's like, the healthcare system is fabulous because you don't have out-of-pocket and crazy stuff like we do in the United States. But how are you feeling? Because you're probably being seen still in both countries.
Yeah. So until next year, I'm being seen still at UCLA in Los Angeles, but next year I'm going to be part of NHS, the national healthcare system in the UK. And so I think just prioritizing finding the right team of people and going through all just the hoops you have to jump through to just paperwork and proving that you need a specialist, et cetera. But after that initial part's over, after you've done the kind of technical parts of it, you're set up with a team of people. And unlike here, like you said, it's like just part of the national healthcare system. So I'm really looking forward to that because it's been such a struggle here with the health insurance here. It's been a disaster, honestly, for me. And I'm looking forward to having that weight off my shoulders. And also, I'm going to hit up Molly too, because I could definitely use some input on how to navigate that.
Absolutely. She would definitely help you. And I think, too, it's like you're out of pocket there, from what I understand from Molly in the UK, is you don't spend more than $150 a year for your medications, things like that. And I know you're an independent artist, but still a job isn't connected to health insurance there. So if, like during the pandemic, when Molly lost her job, she didn't lose her health insurance.
Which is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Everything has their plus and minuses. I mean, we got CF modulators before the UK and before Canada, so there's just a lot of work to be done in healthcare. And so are you thinking about advocacy not only in addition to yourself, but just in general? Like, do you think about doing any of that public advocating?
Yeah, it's actually something, to be totally transparent, I'm very conflicted about it because it's something I'm really interested in and that I've started on a few different things, but I also am still trying to figure out how to talk about my own experience. And I think I've connected with several people who have CF, and figuring out where my voice is most useful is where I'm at right now. I've been really outspoken about issues with the healthcare system here in the US. And like you said, there's pros and cons to everything. But I do know that even not having health insurance in the UK, I got sick there a few months ago. I went to a private doctor who cost $100. I had to get steroids and antibiotics, and I had to pay out of pocket for those because I don't have health insurance there yet. And it cost the equivalent of $26.
Wow.
And so, there's downsides to everything, but like when that happened, it was a real eye opener. And so I've been really vocal about how messed up the healthcare system is here in the US. I mean, I understand now, like people die because they can't afford healthcare all the time. And so I think being somewhere where there's socialized healthcare and also being able to live the difference between the struggles I've had here and then seeing what it's like over there, I think I'll be able to educate myself a lot more and personally get personal with the ups and downs, the upsides and downsides of both healthcare systems. But so far, I'm really looking forward to moving to the UK and taking advantage of that.
Right. I totally get that. Yeah, there are things here like the Prescription Drug Affordability Board that wants to put a cap on things because they're saying the medication's too expensive. But then if you do that, there could be research and design could take a hit and pharma could move out of a state. And I know right now the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, which is the acronym is NICE, and that's in the UK. They're starting to talk about the high cost of medication. So it is everywhere. But I'm glad to hear you're thinking about advocacy because your voice is really important.
Thank you.
And needs to be heard. And I think the place to start is absolutely with your story because it's a great story, a hard story, but it's a great one.
Well, I'm writing a book, actually. That is something that happened this year. I have the opportunity I'm working with some really amazing agents, and I'm writing a book of my story. And I'm right now currently trying to figure out how I want to talk about having CF. And that's actually been one of the most complicated aspects of the book. So I think the process of writing this book and figuring out how I want to talk about it within the book is really going to help me figure out how I want to talk about it publicly in general. Because this is the first time with you right now that I'm talking about it really in depth. So,
well, we're honored. And I think it's interesting to hear you say that about writing the book, because at one point I always said, well, what do I have to say? What I have? I used to think like, I don't know any more than anyone else. And then you realize we all have such different and individual experiences. It is so important to speak up and tell our story because it does impact other people.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you're doing that.
Thanks. And I also think it's okay not to know. That's the conclusion I've reached is I think sometimes saying like, this is what I'm going through and I don't know what it means exactly and I don't know how to make sense of it. Like that's a very human experience. And I think it helps when you hear other people be like, I don't know either. And that's okay. Like you're not alone in not having all the answers. I think you're right. Everyone has their own experience, but that's a very universal thing that we can all kind of relate to is like, we can't have all the answers all the time,
And don't you feel so much better now that you're talking about CF? I always feel like when I talk about it, I get so much back, because someone will say, oh, I can relate to that, or I didn't know about this, or thanks for sharing. How are you feeling now that you're sharing your story more?
It's been, but like, I think as I share it more, I'm interested and excited and curious about what the response will be. But I've been super private about it. But just being outspoken in general, more so this year because I was in a crazy court case too. I was like, my ex tried to sue me and it was a very public, very publicized court case. And I had to make the decision to start speaking up in a very distinctive way and kind of go to bat for myself. And it was terrifying, but after I started doing it, I actually made so many amazing connections, and I felt like I wasn't alone with it at all. It started out as a very terrifying, isolating thing, and then it became a way where I've met so many people and have gotten so much support, and have been able to support complete strangers just by telling my story. So I'm sure that when I start talking about cystic fibrosis and my relationship with having cystic fibrosis, what it means, I'm sure I'll find the same community. I'm hoping.
And do you now share it with the people you're on tour with, or is there no need to do that?
No, I don't. I think I probably, actually, it's a really good point. It's not that I feel like ashamed or anything, but I think it's a lot to have to explain to people. And on tour, when you're on tour, everybody's kind of in their own la la land of self-absorption and fantasy. And it's hard, because you don't want to bring down the vibe or whatever. But one thing I've really struggled with is smoking. So I don't smoke. I've never smoked, but a lot of the musicians I know do. And pretty much every band I ever tour with smokes. A lot of my friends smoke. And smoking has become, especially after lockdown, during the pandemic, I was never around smoke. But now that I'm back out in the world, being around smoke really messes up my lungs. Instantly. I feel it, and it instantly, my lung infections flare up. And I've struggled with figuring out how to tell this to people. It seems like a pretty, my boyfriend's just why don't you just say it? This is a health hazard for you, But it's been hard to even say that much. Even getting to the step of being hey, can you not smoke around me? Even saying that was so weird. As a touring musician, saying that to other touring musicians is I'm kind of the party pooper of the group, but this is just me trying to figure out how I can, once again, defend myself and take care of myself and go to bat for myself. And it's these little small things that come up in my everyday life where I'm oh my gosh, I'm having anxiety about telling someone hey, can you not blow cigarette smoke in my face? Because I have chronic lung infections and pneumonia, and not feeling weird about that. But it's still something that is a little weird for me. So I'm just trying to navigate it.
Yeah, but I would think they would understand, because if they've ever experienced a cold and they think it's the worst thing that's ever happened to them, right? Or they're trying to sing through a cold, you would hope they would get it,
Musicians are a funny group.
But good job starting,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Funny group of people.
Wow. Is CF going to show up more in your music, or what do you think about that direction?
I think it's something I'm making a new record right now. I'm writing this book. I'm going to be composing a film soon. And I'm just thinking about using my voice, how I'm going to use my voice to talk about cystic fibrosis publicly. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that in the next year or two. And what I'm doing now, just talking about it more, I'll get more used to it and accustomed to it. It'll become something that's more natural instead of awkward and uncomfortable. So I think the more I do it, the easier it will be. But I think just with all the projects I have going on, the attention that will bring, I really want to make it a point in this next, the next round of press releases and all the press I'm doing next year for the projects I'm working on now. I want to make it a point to talk more openly about cystic fibrosis and bringing more awareness to it. I think it's really important. It's important for me as well as just to be able to be an outspoken voice, for other people who have CF, because it's relatively unknown to a lot of people. I didn't even know, I'd never even heard of it when I was diagnosed with it. So I think just using my platform, I have to figure out a way to use my platform to be able to speak more openly and publicly about it when these new projects start to get attention.
I think once you do, it's going to bring you so many stories and so many connections. I think it's going to blow you away. And people will discover you for so many different reasons, additional people. I just think it's going to be fantastic for you. I wanted to ask you, too, just a couple more things. Are you part of the 10% that is not able to go on any CF modulator or?
So my mutation that I have on my mom's side is like nothing is known about it. It's been really, really a mystery to everybody, every doctor, every specialist. However, a lab tested my combo against the Trikafta, the 2 drugs that make up Trikafta. Mm-hmm. And it was responsive. So the issue with a lot of, insurance won't cover any of these things unless it's proven that my mutation specifically can be benefited from these medications. And because my mutation's so rare, there's really no proof that I could show to insurance companies. So I'm going down different routes trying to just have the genetic testing done independently in labs so that I could then have these labs write verified letters saying that my mutations do respond to this medication. So that's where I'm at right now. Otherwise, I don't have like a daily regimen of anything. It's just kind of the Wild West out here.
Wow.
They tripped me on, is it Pulmozyme?
Pulmozyme? Mm-hmm. Yep. Albuterol, that kind of stuff.
But the nebulizer. Mm-hmm. And I had such a crazy allergic reaction to it, I had to be hospitalized.
Oh, no.
It actually shut my lungs down completely.
Wow.
And I passed out. So it's been very strange. And I've done different trials of medications, and even Trikafta, I've had many sample packs. And it's really like, it makes no sense what's worked and what hasn't. So right now I'm just trying to get the genetic testing done or the testing done against the mutation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you're figuring it out, and that's what's important. And what works for my girls isn't going to work for you, and vice versa. So I'm glad you have doctors that are working on it. And I have to tell you, so I know you love cats, right? Like,
yes.
How many cats do you have now?
I don't have any right now. I was just fostering a couple, but then I decided to not commit to adopting them because I knew I was moving overseas. But when I get over there, I plan on adopting.
That is wonderful. Well, I've gotten a cat since we talked, and she's like on her 18th hour of sleep right now or something crazy.
I guess she's napping.
But she's napping, yes. And actually, my daughter Emily is visiting from Chicago, and she brought her cat. So the 2 cats are sleeping, napping, of course.
But they get along?
They get along, and cats are incredible. This is my first cat ever. We adopted her.
What?
Yes,
Oh
it's the
my
first
gosh.
cat. So you'll find this funny. So she was on the streets for a year, adopted her. She was 9 pounds. And then all of a sudden I thought, oh my gosh, she has food insecurity. So I'm always going to leave food out. Then she doubled her size. And so she was 18 pounds. And I was like, oh my gosh. So she's been on this little safe veterinary, diet, and she's down 3 pounds. And those 3 pounds, she's like hopping over things now. She's like back to her 2-year-old little self, and she still has some more weight to lose. But it's hilarious. Her energy level now is like, she's like, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
They're so funny.
You know what? There's such characters. I can't believe every cat has such a strong personality of their own. And yeah, I'm a huge cat person, obviously, as you know, but anytime someone's like, cats are all the same and they're all like this, they're all like that, and I don't like them, it's like, you're so wrong. You're so wrong. They're so complex and unique and hilarious and just goofballs too, just complete goofballs. But
they are.
I'm so happy that you got a cat. You've been converted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you have one, and you get it.
Right? Oh my gosh. Night and day. And then just to throw a little crazy in there, we got a puppy.
Oh my God.
On top, I know. But they all like each other, so it's all fine. But it's very funny.
Is the cat kind of raising the puppy? Because a lot of, when you get a puppy and you already have a cat, they rear. They're the ones who are like raising the puppy. And the puppy actually, I think dogs turn out better when they're raised by cats.
Oh, yeah. She definitely puts him in his place.
Yeah.
She's not swatting or screaming at him. She even gives him a look or like, back off, sit down, like, chill out. So it's very funny. It's a zoo over here.
That's great. I'm happy for you.
Well, thanks for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I really appreciate the opportunity. And this is definitely something I've been wanting to do. And this is, and I'm figuring out, like I said, how to do it. So this helps me a lot. And it's difficult for me to articulate a lot of this. So thanks for being kind of my soft launch.
I think you did a great job. And I know you're going to help people and inspire people when they hear this podcast. So thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks. We'll talk soon.
We will.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen,
It's not complicated.
who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrating, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.